Imagine being publicly humiliated by a figure of authority simply because of the color of your skin. That's exactly what happened to a young black girl when a racist cop took things too far, not just with words, but with actions that left her feeling powerless and exposed. The scene was set in broad daylight as the officer aggressively shaved her head, mocking her in front of a crowd that watched in horror and disbelief. It seemed like no one could stop him, but just when it felt like the situation couldn't get worse, a twist changed everything. Enter her father, a lawyer known for his calm demeanor but fierce sense of justice. In a matter of seconds, he arrived on the scene, not just as a father, but as someone ready to stand up for what's right. His presence immediately shifted the power dynamic, but would it be enough to undo the damage already done? As tensions rise, the question remains: will this father's legal expertise and determination be enough to hold the officer accountable, or will this be another story of injustice swept under the rug? Stay tuned to see what happens next in this gripping battle for justice, where one man's fight could change everything for his daughter and for the community. To understand the gravity of the situation, you need to know a little more about this family. The young girl, Maya, had always been confident, proud of her heritage, and loved her natural hair. It was more than just hair to her. It was a symbol of strength, culture, and beauty. But to the officer standing in front of her, her identity didn't matter. The cop, whose history of biased behavior was well known in the community, had seen Maya as nothing more than an object to be degraded. With every snip of the clippers, he stripped away more than just her hair. He was stripping away her dignity. What the officer didn't know was that Maya's father, Robert, wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. He had spent years fighting against injustice in courtrooms, but his toughest battle was always at home, trying to teach his children that they could rise above the hate in the world. His success as a lawyer had earned him respect, but it was his love for his family that made him relentless when it came to protecting them. When Robert received the call about Maya, he didn't hesitate. Within moments, he was on his way, his mind racing with thoughts of what he might find. The closer he got, the more his heart raced. What could he do to stop this officer's cruelty? And most importantly, could he get to Maya in time to shield her from the lasting scars this encounter might leave? The stakes were higher than ever. As Robert neared the scene, he could feel his pulse quicken, his mind grappling with the worst-case scenarios. He had seen injustice before, too many times, but nothing had ever prepared him for seeing his own daughter subjected to it. His thoughts flickered to her mother, who had always told Maya to keep her head high, never let anyone make her feel less than she was. But how could Robert shield Maya from something so deep-seated, so systemic? How could he explain to her that the world sometimes doesn't play fair? Meanwhile, Maya was doing everything she could to hold herself together. Every part of her body screamed to fight back, but she knew better. She had seen her brother face similar humiliation when he was wrongly accused of something he didn't do, and the last thing she wanted was for things to escalate further. The officer's eyes burned with an intensity that felt like he was relishing in the power he held over her. As the clippers buzzed through her thick hair, she forced herself to focus on the small crowd of bystanders, some of whom stood frozen, unsure of how to intervene, while others openly recorded the entire incident. No one dared to speak up. In the distance, Robert could see the flashing lights of the squad car, and as he approached the scene, his lawyer instincts kicked in. He immediately assessed the situation. There was Maya, sitting in that humiliating position, but what about the officer? Was this going to be another case of an officer trying to justify abuse of power? Or was there more to this story than anyone could see? The crowd's whispers reached Robert's ears as he made his way through them. A few people tried to offer him sympathetic glances, but most kept their distance. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. His daughter wasn't just a victim in this moment, she was a symbol of the larger problem. But could he, one man in a sea of broken systems, be the one to make a difference? As Robert reached Maya's side, the tension in the air grew thick. The officer turned toward him, his face unreadable. Robert locked eyes with the man, searching for any hint of remorse or at the very least, an ounce of shame. But all he saw was defiance. What would Robert do next? Could he contain his anger, or would the situation escalate into something much more dangerous? The moment Robert stood beside Maya, the world around him seemed to slow down. He could feel his anger rising, but he knew better than to act out of impulse. His calmness was his weapon now, the one thing that could give him control of this chaotic situation. The officer eyed him warily, clearly aware of who Robert was. It didn't take a genius to recognize the man who'd won case after case, always fighting for the underdog. But today, Robert wasn't just a lawyer. He was a father, and his daughter's humiliation cut deeper than any legal battle ever could. "Is this how you protect and serve?" Robert asked, his voice steady, but there was an undeniable edge to it. The officer didn't flinch, but there was a brief flicker in his eyes, a moment of uncertainty. It didn't last long. The cop shifted his stance, the power dynamics still very much in his favor. Maya, sitting there with her head now partially shaved, felt her heart race. She could hear the murmurs from the crowd, some cheering Robert on, while others, probably too scared, just watched. She wanted to tell her father to leave it alone, that it wasn't worth it, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. She wanted him to do something, anything, to make it stop. The officer crossed his arms, clearly unfazed by Robert's presence. "She was resisting arrest," the officer muttered, but his words hung in the air like an excuse, one that didn't hold any weight. Robert wasn't buying it. He knew this wasn't about resisting arrest. It was about power, his power over a young black girl who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. For a split second, Robert considered his options. Should he try to de-escalate, call for backup, or go for a more direct confrontation? His mind raced as he watched the officer's posture shift, as if he were gearing up for something more. Robert's eyes darted to the phone in the officer's hand, seeing the recording. Was the cop documenting this for his own defense? "You've crossed a line," Robert said, his voice low, but filled with a sharp certainty. The crowd fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya squeezed her fists, her breath shallow. She could feel the weight of her father's words, his determination, but she also felt the sting of vulnerability. This moment, this horrifying violation, wasn't something she could erase easily, and as she watched her father take another step forward, she realized there was something at stake that went beyond her own humiliation. The officer might have underestimated her father, but Maya knew her dad wasn't someone to back down, especially when it came to protecting her. As the officer took a step toward Robert, the energy shifted. It was as if both men were waiting for the other to make the first move. Everyone around them seemed to hold their breath, the next moment poised to explode. Would Robert's calm resolve break through, or would the officer make one final move that would change everything? Just as the standoff seemed ready to explode, a sudden shout pierced through the tension. "Move! Now!" It was a voice Robert didn't recognize, but it sent a chill down his spine. Before anyone could react, another officer, this one younger and visibly nervous, rushed toward the scene, his hand gripping his weapon as if unsure of whether to draw it. The crowd gasped, some people instinctively taking steps back. Robert's eyes darted from one officer to the other. What was happening? This wasn't the same officer who had humiliated Maya. This was someone new. But what was his role in all this? The officer's arrival threw everything into chaos. The first cop, still standing firm, didn't flinch, but his posture seemed to change ever so slightly, as though he were unsure of his ally's intentions. It was as if the game had changed, and now there were higher stakes at play. "Stay calm," the younger officer ordered, his voice shaky but loud enough to be heard. But Robert could sense that it wasn't directed at him. It was directed at the officer who had been in control until now. The whole situation felt wrong, like a script that was suddenly being rewritten in real time. Maya, still reeling from the violation, could see the new officer's hand twitch nervously by his side. This wasn't just about the humiliation anymore. There were layers to the tension that weren't clear yet, and she feared that whatever was coming next would only make things worse.